the money I pay for rent is money that I use to house myself and to feed myself. The money that the landlord receives, they're using for an investment. It's
Yeah.
not equivalent. And I think that to exploit the tenant class, the tenants, is not the right place. We've seen a lot of headlines about the CAC giving themselves bonuses and increases in their salaries, and I think that maybe they should look to their left and right rather than down at us.
As Quebec's housing crisis deepens, tenants are sounding the alarm. On May 31st, renters and housing advocates gathered in Montreal to protest the province's new rent calculation tactic. This could push prices even higher and leave tenants increasingly vulnerable to evictions and exploitation. COTV sat down with Lina from Tenant Rights Quebec about the urgent demands raised during the protests, as well as the CAC's government role in weakening rent control protection and the everyday struggle tenants face just trying to stay housed. From lack of enforcement to a growing power imbalance, Lina is telling us why collective action is more important than ever in the fight for housing justice. Hi, Lina. How are you?
Hello, I'm so good. Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you for being so ready to do the interview with us. So I was wondering if you could please first introduce yourself and your title and your organization.
So, my name is Lena. I run Tenant Rights QC. It's an Instagram, Facebook page where I post short form videos explaining tenants their rights, tenants in Quebec, and just like simple things that we should all kind of know how to do, whether it's refusing an increase or getting our landlord to do repairs, and just things that as a society, as tenants, we should know because, you know, our cities are changing and landlords have a lot of powers, and so do we, and we just need to know.
Thank you so much. So, as we talked about, you were at the May 31st protest, and I was wondering, yeah, if you can tell me about the rent control protest that happened on May 31st?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a very rainy day, but the turnout was really good. I mean, especially considering the weather. I've been to housing protests that were definitely smaller than that. There was really good energy going on. There was a lot of different housing committees. It was organized by the RECLAC, which is like the way I think of them is kind of the mama of all the housing committees. It's the coalition of housing committees and tenants associations of Quebec. Sorry, I'll say that again. So it's the coalition of housing committees and tenant associations of Quebec. They do really important work, and as it was their protests, they had the demands. They had set the demands, which I totally agree with. So the three demands were the withdrawal of the CAC's new rent setting regulation, also an immediate rent freeze while a new law would be drafted, and then legislature to ensure real rent control in Quebec. That's something that we definitely need. So that was what the protest was about.
Perfect. And you just mentioned the demands. And with everything that you've mentioned, can you explain why this protest was so important?
Yeah, so the new proposal is a different way to calculate our rent increases. And, I do agree that we could benefit from a new method. I find a lot of people don't know how to determine whether their rent increase is fair. The calculation grid is complicated. You have to add numbers that you as a tenant don't necessarily have easy access to. So I do think that a change is worth doing, but the one that this government has proposed is not one that benefits the tenants in any way, pretty much. Um, yeah, I'm still familiarizing myself with the entire law, but I'm happy to go into it a little more. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that actually would be great if you could just talk about the tax new regulation for people who don't know. Because even for me, I wasn't familiar with it until I saw your post. I was wondering why it got so high suddenly, 5.9%. And until I saw your post, I was like, oh, so there's a new calculation. This is why. So could you, from what you know, could you explain what it is?
Of course, yeah. So actually, this year we're still like the 5.9% that we got this year, which was the highest in 30 years, was still using the existing calculation. So the new one was just released and it's being proposed for next year. Um, and they're kind of disguising it as a good thing, this new calculation, this new method of calculation, rather, because if you apply the method for this year, the increase would only be about 4%. So, that sounds promising, right? But then if you look at the past 10 years, all the way back to 2010, every year would have actually been higher, except this last year, which was the highest increase in 30 years. So it's not giving us a full picture. They're claiming that it's a good thing when actually it's not. Overall, on average, we would be paying 15% more at this point if that method was in force as of 2010. So that's not a good thing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And also, yeah, so I really thought that's why it was so high this year, but actually, like, it's not the, okay.
No,
Uh,
for this year it was a combination of things because a rent increase. And I think I have printed out somewhere. I'll just open the TEL 2025 rent increase and I'll
yeah, more, it's,
tell you. Is. So yeah, it's made up of different components. Like a rent increase is made up of different components. So electricity, gas, heating, oil, and other source of energy, maintenance costs, building service costs. Like it's a list of
mhm.
like about 10 things. And um, the percentage of each of those things varies year to year. And so this year, especially, the net income went up like higher than it's ever been. So their net income was impacting our rent increase. And again, I don't like, I understand this as best as I can and I'm getting help to understand it. But yeah, this year was just like very high for that reason.
So talking about the CAC's new rent calculation, how will this policy shift impact the average tenant?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Like I said, I'm still familiarizing myself with the whole proposal, going into the fine print with some help. And I'm going to soon make a video explaining it in a clear and simple way, which is what I do. But yeah, some of the key points that I want to share is that they want to use the market as a factor to determine the rent increase amount, which results in an absolutely vicious, never ending cycle of increase. It's just it doesn't make sense and it's not a good idea. And second of all, they want to change the way that renovations or repair expenses are assigned in a way where the tenant would take on most, if not all, of the cost. Um, and that's terrible. On top of it just being terrible, it opens such an incentive for renovictions, like more than already. Um, yeah, so that's the two key points that I'm like no one's really talking about, or not nobody. Housing committees of course are talking a lot about it, but I think the general public hasn't grasped those details, and those are two things that are um, terrible. They would result in such steep increases and imbalance of power even furthermore.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, like, talking about how tenants find themselves impacted, and I know we talked about how like a new calculation like this would, obviously, like, really the impacts are actually quite like intense.
Hmm.
uh if we can go back to this year and the calculation that was made for 5.9%, what kind of increase have people talked to you about in terms of, like, their rent increase this year?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of a lot of different numbers. I on Instagram I put out a poll at some point, like a little question, and just asked what was your increase this year, and there was such a big range, and I think that's kind of like a theme where, the landlords of course are supposed to follow the grid, they're supposed to follow the tell
Mhm.
recommendations, but there's no mechanisms preventing them from asking for more. And if a tenant doesn't know better and just accepts, then that's the end. There's no going back, there's no undoing. And so, yeah, I was hearing anywhere from 5.9, and even 5.9, people were reaching out to me
Yeah.
and saying, hey, like, this is a lot. Can I fight this? And in many cases, like, just a little clarification, my page is not for individual advice. I provide information. I don't help one-on-one
Mhm.
situations. I don't have the capacity or the qualifications, but I'm curious. I just wanted to hear what people were going through, and even my mom, she wrote to me. She's like, "I got a really high increase. Is this okay?" And I was like,
No.
"Yeah, that's it. I can't tell you to fight because you'll lose." It leaves us in really um, a position where our hands are tied, and there's no recourse. Some landlords just saying, "Oh, well, if you want this, then I'm gonna that," and it's not right. It's not fair, and to that, I do wanna just mention that in Quebec and Canada, we have a one-party consent rule for recording conversations in person, meaning one person needs to know. That can be yourself, and you don't have to inform your landlord or the people around you that you're recording. If you're being threatened, if you're being intimidated, I really suggest recording that. Um,
Yeah.
because you should. I'm not saying you have to do anything with it. I'm not saying you need to escalate it further, but if it's an ongoing pattern and if it's going to keep happening, you want to have that documentation. Um, and as much as possible, of course, get things in writing if not.
Yeah.
Um, and it puts you in a weird situation because you're made to feel like you're doing something wrong by exercising the rights you have, and that's wrong. You are allowed to say no to a rent increase. It's in your rights, and the landlord has actions they can take once you say no. And in those options is not intimidation.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. That's not how it should work. If you open a case at the TAL, your name goes into the registry. I'm not saying that to discourage people from going to the TAL. There's instances where it's absolutely worth it and you should, but it it's another imbalance against tenants because now when you apply for a new apartment in the future, a landlord can look up your name,
Mhm.
and if you have a case, they'll sometimes just be like, "No, this is a problematic tenant. I
Mhm.
don't want to rent to them."
That's interesting. I did not know that. Like,
That's
I
not.
mean, it makes sense in my head that they would do that,
Mhm.
knowing how it works, but I did not know that.
Yeah, and even when it's like a situation where the tenant is completely right, and like it could be for a variety of reasons, whether it's
Mhm.
disputing a rent increase or taking them to the TAL because they're not doing the renovations in your apartment. Like it kind of, in a way, almost doesn't matter what the reason for the case is. Um, but if your name is there, you might be discriminated against, and that's just so unfair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very unfair. I did wonder to go back to, and this is just like speculating. I just want your opinion.
Hmm.
Um, with the CAC's new calculation, it's going to come into effect next year. Is that right?
That's what they're suggesting. That's what
Supposedly,
they're
yeah,
aiming
supposed to.
for. I know there's a petition right now
Yeah.
that's been launched, an ASNAT petition. So I'm going to be promoting that shortly. And I think the more signatures we have, the more of a chance we have to fight against it. There's also going to be another protest by the Reclac
Mm,
organized
okay.
on September 13th.
Hmm.
Let me just double check and make sure I'm saying that right. Yes, Saturday, September 13th. So, we still have time. I think we have this advantage of knowing that it's coming and educating ourselves about why it's so harmful and what we can do. And and I'd really like us to win this time. You know,
Yes.
we lost
Bill,
Bill 31. The lease transfers are now very unreliable, not impossible. But I think there's been more and more awareness just because the the cost of housing is going up so much and rent increases have gone up. I think there's more of a general awareness. People are just recognizing that something's not right. Everything's piling up against them
yeah.
as tenants. And so I'm hoping that with our collective awareness and Montreal energy, we can fight back. And of course, it'll benefit the whole province.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
just, we're known for our protests and for fighting back, and it's the reason we have so many protections in the first place. Like as Quebecers, tenants are very protected compared to the rest of
Mm.
the country, and I don't know, the world probably.
Yeah. Oh, it makes sense. It really makes sense. I was wondering, do you think that the CAC's new calculation will allow even more like leeway for landlords, or
Mm,
just
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's not so much about leeway because, in a way, there's already nothing stopping them
yeah.
from asking more than that's right, and no repercussions, no way to undo an increase if an unknowing tenant agrees to an outrageous amount. It's why I'm so driven to create the videos that I do, and I just want people to know their rights, to be informed and empowered to exercise the rights that they have. It's unfair that it falls on our shoulders to kind of protect our city and protect our rights as tenants in general, but like being informed is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
We need to use the knowledge and protect ourselves and our neighbors.
Yeah. And one thing that I did like that you mentioned is the fact that like Montreal is known for its protests and people fighting back, and as you said, like a lot of um, laws have been put in place to protect people due to like the protests that have been um, done. I was wondering, like, do you think that the protest that you went to on May 31st can actually influence policy and or public opinion?
No change will happen if we do nothing.
Hmm.
So I think we all have a role in this fight, whether it's in the streets or in our minds or otherwise. I think that we have to do something at this point. We can't just sit back and watch the headlines continue. I mean, our housing minister is an ex real estate agent.
Mm,
We can't let her go unchecked.
it says a lot, yeah. And I was wondering, actually, yeah, because I know like she's been known to have said some stuff about, um, leases and rent and what people are paying, some things that might be seen as out of touch. And I feel like a lot of people also uh, have the same ways of thinking where they might say that these rent hikes are just part of like the market, the way things work. Like each year things like become like more expensive, so like why not the rent as well, right? So why would you say to those people or people who think in that way?
No. No. No, it doesn't have to go this way. I mean, um, tenants are seen as lower class by a lot of people. The American dream, or the picture of success is owning your home and having a family, and I don't think everyone subscribes to that, but I think in the mainstream that is the vision of success, and a lot of people see tenants as either like in between stages, or just not quite figured out yet. And I think that what you choose, how you choose to live, what kind of circumstance you choose to live in is completely your decision. But I don't think that tenancy is any less legitimate than home ownership. I think a lot of people live as tenants their whole lives, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't make us in any way lower class citizens. And then if the market has to work this way, no, I don't think so. And I think that, you know, the money I pay for rent is money that I use to house myself and to feed myself. The money that the landlord receives, they're using for an investment. It's
Yeah.
not equivalent. And I think that to exploit the tenant class, the tenants, is not the right place. You know, we've seen a lot of headlines about the CAC giving themselves bonuses and increases in their salaries, and I think that maybe they should look to their left and right rather than down at us.
I was wondering, because I'm guessing that obviously you follow the news and everything, especially since you're so up to date with what's going on in terms of rent and just like people fighting for their rights. Do you find that anything has been like missing in coverage from like medias or just like in general?
I think that there's more conversation happening about housing and tenants and the cost of living, for sure. But I think that we could always use more at this point.
Mm.
And otherwise, I think there's a big elephant in the room that's not being addressed. Our housing minister, she's an ex real estate agent.
Mm.
How can this be? How can this be? And whose interests do you think she's going to represent? It's not the tenants, and she's proven that time and time again. I don't understand how she can be our housing minister.
In terms of like what's been going on, the rent control protests, have you seen any responses from city officials?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think if you attend and if you read up on different parties and different figures, you'll see who's standing up, who's attending, who's speaking out very loud. Um, I can say from my own experience, I've seen Quebec Solidaire be very vocal about housing justice and always at the protests. I'm sure there's others. I'm just that's who I can point to right away. But I'll also say, um, I don't know if you know Isaac Peltz. He's an
Yes.
independent journalist. He created a website that shows which members of parliament are landlords. So you can look up all the MPs across Canada, and overall, it's almost 50%. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind that the people in power, at least half of them, are landlords. So, you have to think about what kind of policies they're going to support and give them a call and tell them, like I think we should all be calling our MPs more and calling our city. I think we should all be calling our city officials more and sharing our opinions and experiences.
Thank you. And how can people support the movement against like rent hikes and just like abusive behaviors from landlords?
There's so many ways. There's so many ways. Staying informed would be my top recommendation. You can follow my page, Tenant Rights QC. The Reclac would be a great resource as well, and your local housing committee too. Um, Also, talk to your neighbors, compare your rent increases, and share information. I think that's so powerful, and I know it's hard to talk to your neighbors, to just knock on your door, but you know, you live beside each other, you live in the same building, possibly, or on the same block. Like, I think it's really important to communicate and to create that sense of community. Yeah.
Thank you. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about it, but what are the long term risks if things keep going in this direction?
Yeah. Catastrophic. I don't mean to be so dramatic, but I feel like we're really at a turning point. Montreal has such a unique balance, and I don't want us to let the magic disappear. Music venues are shutting down, gentrification is on the rise kind of everywhere, and there's a lot of visible signs, but a lot is happening too. I think most people weren't aware of Bill 31 when it happened, and I think most people don't yet know about this rent increase modification proposal from hell. And, for the same reason that I love our city, I believe in it, and I believe in our capacity to organize and stand up to protect it. Um, Again, the entire province will benefit from it, but I live here and nowhere is quite like it. Montreal has an energy I haven't encountered anywhere else in the world, and I will fight to bring us together, to be informed, and to be ready to fight back against the threats to its well being. I hope you will join me.
Thank you. And I did wonder, because you did say you were going to continue fighting. So, what kind of changes, legally or socially, do you think we need to protect tenants moving forward?
Yeah. So, legally, I think rent control for sure would be a huge, huge benefit to us all. It's something housing committees have been calling on for a long time. Also, having a mandatory public registry showing all the prices of rent across the city, that would be really a great start. And a new rent increase calculation method, one that makes it both easy for both landlords and tenants to understand it, to follow it, and one that doesn't strip tenants of their rights. Um, Another thing could be, oops, so also like penalties and effective repercussions against landlords who break the law and abuse their power. I think there's really a lack of that right now, and so we're seeing an increase of it, of course. And socially, I think just more awareness. Our voices matter, and we need to be informed and use them effectively.
Maybe I'm wrong, but wasn't there supposed to be like a registry for landlords?
Yeah, you might be thinking of the rental registry. It does exist. It's a wonderful resource. It's just it's not mandatory. So of course there's a lot of information missing,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes landlords have tried to also input their own data.
Oh.
Unfortunately, there's some mechanisms preventing steps preventing that, but it's not foolproof. I think that having it government mandated and regulated so that it's up to date and accurate would be the best way, so that it's
Mm-hmm.
comprehensive and it covers all the units that are on the market.
Perfect. Is there anything I did not ask that you would like to add or discuss?
Yeah. There's so much happening in the world right now, and many causes well worth our attention. But I think that if we can't pay our rent, we enter crisis mode.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we can focus on. And I feel like, unfortunately, many tenants only learn about their rights when they are in this crisis mode,
Mm.
and often when, you know, after they've been taken advantage of. And my hope is that with Tenant Rights QC, I can invite folks in to learn in a way that's not overwhelming, hopefully entertaining, and definitely clear, and before they're at the crisis zone and maybe preventing them from getting into crisis mode because we need to know our rights.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time for this. It's really, really um, interesting and it was very insightful.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy we got to chat today.
Thank you.